Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I hope you're enjoying Sam's music collection. It feels as though we're revving up through the course of the day. By the end of things, we're really going to hit our rock and roll stride. But now we get a chance, if you like, to look at the world as a whole. I really am over the moon and hugely grateful that Tom Friedman's joining us. Tom, as everyone will know, is the New York Times' probably most celebrated columnist and Pulitzer Prize winning author, and I could give you the whole CV, but it would be embarrassing for him and it would make all the rest of us feel inadequate. So instead, Tom, I'm going to try and get stuck in. The way in which our thinkings work is we really want to hear you and hear what people think about as they're hearing you. So I hope people will continue to, feed into the chat through the course of it. Please raise your hand digitally if you want me to bring you in. But Tom, why don't we start where we are? I know we are very early in this story of COVID-19, but what do you think are the lessons that the world is going to learn from the coronavirus?
Well, James, thanks for inviting me. Thanks to Alexandra and your whole team. Great to be with you all and your community. Let me just share with you how I looked at this. I've spent most of my time, I would say, in trying to understand where we are, talking not to economists or technologists or political scientists, but talking to naturalists. That's really the lens through which I think you need to understand this particular global phenomenon. So my daughter, Natalie, is the executive producer of All Things Considered Weekend on National Public Radio. So I'm a faithful listener. And on Easter Sunday, NPR did a roundup of Easter sermons by different pastors around America and on her show. And I was particularly struck by the last one. It was by Michael Curry, who I think married Meghan and Harry. And he was at the National Cathedral. And he ended his Easter sermon with a song. And the song was, "He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole wide world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands." So I just substitute he for she being Mother Nature. She got the whole world in her hands for the first time since 1918, which is to say, for the first time in the life of our generation of human species, we face a single global challenge from Mother Nature. Now, the coronavirus. Now, the coronavirus is just one of the many fastballs, to put this in American baseball terms, one of the challenges Mother Nature throws at her plants and animals and humans, to sort out who is the fittest, who should survive and thrive in the next generation and pass their DNA to the next generation. This is just another one of those. She uses floods, she uses droughts, she uses forest fires. This is what Mother Nature on her downside does. She throws these fastballs at us and to see who is the fittest and who should pass on their DNA. And when you're faced with one of Mother Nature's challenges, and we're faced globally with one of Mother Nature's challenges, who does she reward? To me, this is the central question. Who does she reward? She does not reward the strongest, does not reward the smartest. She does not reward the richest. She only rewards the most adaptive. That is who she rewards. So our central global challenge today is which countries, which communities, which collection of our species, collectively and individually, will be able to adapt to her latest fastball, the coronavirus. And she basically, I would argue, has only three criteria for adaptation. And that is because the thing you have to keep in mind about Mother Nature, she's just chemistry, biology, and physics. That's all she is. You cannot talk her up. You cannot talk her down. You can't say, Mother Nature, we've been having a recession. Would you take a few months off? She will do whatever chemistry, biology, and physics dictate. And she always bats last. And she always bats 1,000. Do not mess with Mother Nature. Now, Donald Trump's biggest mistake was because he's completely deaf to the natural world, because he measures everything in money and dollars and cents and markets. The reason we were so slow off the mark in America was because Trump thought if steps he was taking or not taking were resulting in the market going up, he was winning against Mother Nature. Now, you may recall in early March, Trump gave a disastrous national TV address. The market went down almost roughly 2,000 points. And then he took steps the next day that reversed that, and the market went up, I believe, all-time high for a single day. And Donald Trump actually took a screenshot of that market graph, and he sent it to Lou Dobbs of Fox Business News. And that knucklehead showed it that evening on Fox Business News. While Trump was taking that screenshot, while that knucklehead Lou Dobbs was showing it to his viewers on Fox, Mother Nature was invisibly, silently, inexorably, exponentially, and mercilessly spreading coronavirus throughout our society. And she does not start her day at 9:30, as the New York Stock Exchange does. She does not end at 4, and she does not take Saturdays and Sundays off. She's just chemistry, biology, and physics, and she will spread this virus as far and as wide as she can until she runs out of hosts. That logic is where I start, because now we go back to adaptation. Does she reward in the face of a challenge like that? She rewards people who adopt 3 strategies. The first is humility. If you are not humble about Mother Nature's fastballs, droughts, viruses, floods, tornadoes, hurricanes, she will hurt you or someone you love. She rewards first humility. Secondly, she rewards coordination, because Mother Nature has evolved her viruses. Find any crack in your immune system. She's been evolving these for millennia to find any crack in your immune system. So if you are not utterly coordinated in your response, whether it's a family, a community, a city, a state, a town, a country, or a globe, she will find you and she will hurt you or someone you love. And lastly, your response to her, your political response, that is your governing response, has to be entirely rooted in chemistry, biology, and physics. If it's not rooted entirely in chemistry, biology, and physics, if it's rooted in ideology, if it's rooted in politics, if it's rooted in a presidential election calendar, she will hurt you or someone you love. So that to me is why I start with the natural world, because it really shows you what your, I think, right responses need to be, and the limits of politics and ideology in this situation. Now, if you look around the world, the central political challenge, and I've been pointing this out from the very beginning, much to the distress of some people, is you need a sustainable, that's a hugely important word, a sustainable strategy that maximizes saving lives and saving livelihoods. That is the choice, only choice Mother Nature gives you, okay? There is a moral, ethical trade-off built into this challenge. You cannot escape it, because she's just chemistry, biology, and physics. And telling you, if all you are is focused on lives, I will kill every job. And if all you are is focused on jobs, I will kill as many lives as I can. So the strategy you need is one that can sustainably, because the virus is going to be here until we get herd immunity, either through a vaccine or 2/3 of us getting infected and developing natural immunity. It's not going away. Millions of people are going to get this. We're all just protoplasm for this virus. So she is telling you, you better have a sustainable strategy for maximizing lives and livelihoods. Now, there are 3 models on the world stage right now, basically. The first is the Chinese model.
Mm-hmm.
Lock down everybody and then use the AI surveillance state systems that China uses to control its people, to trace, track, and quarantine, to test, trace, track, and quarantine people who are carriers of COVID-19, and basically limit the spread so you can open up your society and economy as a masked, distanced economy that will get you through until you get a vaccine. That's the Chinese strategy, and it has various democratic variants. We see it in South Korea, we see the German model, etc. The second strategy is the Swedish strategy. Sweden said, we think the most sustainable approach for us is actually partial lockdown. We'll close colleges and high schools, but we'll keep K through 9 open so adults who have kids in school can go to work, particularly health workers. Although they also have a lot of daycare in Sweden, government daycare. We will ask people to socially distance at their discretion, but we will keep restaurants, shops, factories, and malls open at people's own discretion. Mm-hmm. We will opt, rather than waiting for a vaccine, we will actually opt for herd immunity. We will count on the fact that 80% of the people who get coronavirus, who are below the age 65, experience it as a mild or tough flu, and will get over it or be asymptomatic entirely, and not require hospitalization or intensive care units. And we will bet that the number of people who get the virus and do not require hospitalization will be less than the number of hospital beds and ICU units in the country. Mm-hmm. Sweden doesn't want to talk publicly about it. So if you listen to their diplomats, they'll say, oh no, we're not going for herd immunity, but that's exactly what chief epidemiologist is saying that, and we will let people get the virus and overcome it naturally and build what we believe, there's still not been totally confirmed, but believe will develop the antibodies to it. Now, Sweden's policy is not run by their prime minister, it's run by the country's chief epidemiologist. And he said last week he believes that Stockholm is about 30% to herd immunity now, and their hospital workers are about 30% to herd immunity. Many people have pointed out that Sweden has more deaths because they did not do a good enough job, as they themselves admit, sheltering their most vulnerable. That's also part of the equation. You shelter the vulnerable, and you let the less vulnerable go out and circulate and build natural immunity. They did not do a good job of that, but people have really exaggerated the numbers because Sweden has fewer cases per capita than the United States, and it has fewer deaths per capita than France. It does have higher deaths than its immediate neighbors, Norway and Denmark. God bless those countries for doing well. But people point to those figures, in my view, completely misread the situation. That the real comparison is, where is Sweden 3 months from now? If they've herd immunity and there's a cap on their deaths, and others have not, and they've got their economy going, that's how you have to judge them. My own view is it's way too soon to judge them as a success or a failure. But I believe it's an experiment worth watching. And I'm struck, oddly, how many on the left seem to be rooting for them to fail, for reasons which absolutely beguile me. I don't know if it's the right way, but it's clearly not off the spectrum wrong. And I think we should just wait and see whether it works. So that's the second model. You go for natural herd immunity. You let 60 to 70% of your population get infected and develop natural antibodies. Then you sound the all clear for the most vulnerable, and they can come out, and the virus will have run out of people to infect at that stage. The third model is the United States. Our model is, I'm tired of being locked down. What the fuck? I want to go out, and Fox News told me it's okay. And so basically, I would like to say we have a 50-state experiment going. We have a 50-state mess going. Different states in lockdown, not lockdown, less lockdown, but there's only one thing in common in all 50 of our states. All of them are opening up before the criteria established by the CDC, which is 14 days straight of consistently fewer cases. So look, it's another experiment, James. One thing we've learned about coronavirus, this is part of my humility, people experience it differently in different geographies, latitudes, vaccinated populations with BCG. There's all kinds of weird things about this. It comes in a double macchiato version that just hammers you, and it's asymptomatic in 20 to 30% of the people. It is a beguiling virus. And that's why I have great, so I'm not sitting here saying, you guys in Georgia, you're crazy. You guys in my home state of Minnesota, lockdown, you're right, or where I live now in Maryland. All I'm saying is everything I know about nature says that if you didn't build this strategy around chemistry, biology, and physics, if you're just challenging Mother Nature to a duel, show me what you got, baby. Show me what you got. She's going to show you what she got, okay? Sooner or later. And remember, in 1918, cities that locked down in the spring and got hammered were lighter in the fall, and cities that were lighter in the spring got hammered in the fall. So this is a there's just so much we don't know. But I come back to where I began. If your strategy is not rooted in the logic of chemistry, biology, and physics, you're really taking your chance. You're in a duel. You just challenge Mother Nature to a duel.
And Tom, so can I ask you then, let's go back to the moment of the song, right? Because the other element of that is the idea of the whole world in that song. And the interesting thing is, you know, people who've read your books will know that you've probably thought more about the idea of globalization, certainly than most of us. And I wondered whether or not, it's interesting how many people are asking about global leadership, and particularly your second point, coordination, right? And why that's not happening and where it could come from.
Good question, James. So to me, it's not happening for one very obvious reason. Historically, the coordinator in a crisis was the United States of America. We played three roles historically in global crises. We were the galvanizer of the coalition. We were the main supporter of aid and comfort to the disadvantaged and the most hard hit. And we were the source of facts, science, and authoritative information. We are none of those today. Donald Trump is avowedly America first. He's, not interested in any other country. We've provided no aid and comfort to anybody else. Just the opposite. We've told people we want to get the vaccine first to inoculate ourselves, and we don't care about the rest of you. And lastly, we have been an engine for destroying the world's cognitive immunity. You know, there's different forms of immunity. There's immunity to viruses of nature, and there's immunity to viruses of social networks. We, the United States, have been the biggest engine of destroying the world's cognitive immunity. This is a term my friend Marina Gorbis from the Institute of the Future has coined. So our ability to think clearly about nature, about facts, about science, when you have a president who literally lies as he breathes. And there's a very interesting analogy I just sort of thought of yesterday, James, which is that a study just came out that people who are infected with COVID-19 and speak loudly and obnoxiously, they actually are super spreaders of the virus. And online, incidentally, if you speak loudly and obnoxiously, you get moved farther and wider on Twitter and Facebook. So we live in a world now where the loudest, most obnoxious voices are the super spreaders of both cognitive viruses and the COVID-19 virus.
And then what happens in the space that's left by the United States? Do you think this is a temporary political thing, or do you think that something structural has changed? Who steps in, and what kind of world order replaces the one that the US has more or less forged for the better part of a century?
Well, the cliched answer is that China will step in. I don't buy that for a second. Let's look at China for a second. China thought that it could mask the fact that the virus began in Wuhan by giving the world masks to protect against the virus. Well, it turned out a lot of the masks were defective. That's not going to work for China. And there will be a reckoning, a backlash, because people do want to know where the virus started. Even if you're just benign about that, I want to know where and how it started so you will protect yourselves better and I will be more protective. You don't have to be a China basher to want that. We may have noticed 2 weeks ago when Australia's Prime Minister Morrison said we need to have an independent investigation of where and how the virus started. China's ambassador to Australia said, well, if you're going to demand that, then maybe Chinese tourists just won't come to Australia anymore. And maybe we won't buy any more of your wine or any more of your beef. Really? Mm-hmm. You said that? Well, I don't know much about Australia, James. I've only been there half a dozen times, but I know this. Australians will eat dirt before they let you bully them into not demanding an accounting on where and how this virus started. So if that's the Chinese strategy, that is not a strategy for global leadership. Okay. Now, the great tragedy, we will discover that this virus coincided with and obscured the end of a 40-year epoch in modern history. And that was the 40-year marriage of China and the United States. It began in 1979 and it ended in 2019. And by the way, this is a very bad thing because the marriage between the US and China has been a prime engine of globalization and a source of both peace and relative prosperity for the world. Mm. One of the features of that era, was what I call unconscious coupling. An American innovator could wake up in the morning and say, I want to have a supply chain in China. And I want it to start in Wuhan and then go to Guangzhou. Excuse me, a tickle in my throat. Hold on. Okay. But I want to have a supply chain all over China. I want to hire a Chinese scientist. I want to hire the best Chinese student in America. I want my kids' university to have a campus in China. I want my technology company to have a research center in China. And on the Chinese side, they could wake up and say, I want my kid to go to Harvard or Ohio State. 350,000 of them are now in American schools. They could say, I want to work in America, try to get a green card in America. I, as a scientist, I want to work at the National Institute of Health. And they could say, I want to buy a company in America or invest in a company in America. I want my company listed on the New York Stock Exchange. And they could do it, relatively speaking, unconsciously. Mm-hmm. And that created what I call one couple, two systems. Okay, yeah. Sort of joining of our two economies together. Well, what is going on behind the veil of the COVID-19 crisis is actually the divorce of that one couple, two systems. Mm-hmm. And the divorce papers will say the cause of the divorce was irreconcilable differences. Mm-hmm. The real cause of the divorce was that China completely overreached and America completely underperformed. That was, I think, the key thing. China overreached in the South China Sea. It overreached in what it demanded and was ready to steal from foreign investors. It's overreached in Belt and Road. It overreached in China 2025. It basically freaked out the world. And anyone who's been going to China for the last 30 years, as I have, knows China today is so much more open than it was 30 years ago and so much more closed than it was 5 years ago. Okay. Yeah. China has overreached, and America, I would argue to you, has underperformed. And we are blaming them for our total lack of investment in infrastructure, the fact we've developed a culture of dumb as we want to be. Dumb as we want to be. Okay, you can see it now in the way half the people talk about this whole science crisis. And it takes 4 hours and 8 minutes to take the bullet train from Beijing to Shanghai, and it takes 19 hours and 18 minutes to take the bullet train, Acela from New York to Chicago, and New York to Chicago is longer. And that's just a microcosm of how we have underinvested in all the things that made us great: infrastructure, education, research, immigration, and the right rules to incentivize risk-taking and prevent recklessness. And there's asymmetry there now, and it's really destabilized the relationship.
And Tom, then can we talk then about global leadership? What steps in the circumstances of that divorce? And let's do it, if you like, back to front. Let's start with leadership. And I want to go back again to the song, right? You said, you know, he's got the whole world in his hands. I can't keep a note like you, so I won't try. But you swapped he for she. And a lot of people have been really aware of the fact that many of the countries that have handled this best have been led by women. Is there something that you think that is happening in that regard? Is that a coincidence? What's happening?
That's sort of outside my skill set. I have noticed the same thing. Every time when I read a column, there are comments on it. And if I get into the question of leadership, I'm struck at how many people write in about the Prime Minister of New Zealand or the Chancellor of Germany, you know, that's wish if only we had a leader like that. I mean, and I'm sure there's an explanation for that, just outside my skill set. I would say this, James, that I don't think anybody steps in, which again, going back to what does Mother Nature demand? Coordination. A completely uncoordinated response to her global fastball. Now think how dangerous that is. Like, a lot of people point to New Zealand as having done great, and they have done great. They're on it from the beginning. If we only had a prime minister like they have, like Jacinda. But I would say this: New Zealand's an island.
Yeah.
And if they open up, they're going to face this problem. Okay. Well, we are just like a big island. So the idea that we can kind of protect ourselves and not worry about what happens in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua, or that Europe can and not have to worry about sub-Saharan Africa. It's a virus, it's global. And unless you think you can literally seal yourself under a dome and stop any movement of people, it'll come back. Look at the problem Singapore has had. Singapore, semi-authoritarian state. Even China keeps coming back. It keeps popping up, you know. And so it's a global problem. And the reason I mourn the breakdown in US-China relations is, how can we address the next pandemic, climate change? How can we address what is going to be the collapse of some emerging markets? And there are people trying to flood away from zones of disorder to the world of order, the European Union, America, China, okay, without the US and China collaborating. How will we manage the global financial implications of this without the US and China collaborating? Unfortunately, though, we have a Chinese leader and an American leader who have found it very convenient to blame each other to obscure their own failures early on in this crisis. And
then Tom, you know, your recent books though have talked about technology and climate, and if you like, some of the accelerations that are happening in the world that are beyond the reach of government. And I wonder whether or not, I appreciate there may not be an intergovernmental or a governmental global leadership that steps in, but whether or not there's space left by the absence of political leaders for community leaders, for business leaders, for foundation leaders, or is that just a little naive, slightly wishful thinking?
You know, I think it is, James. I do believe that there has to be a certain structure for a certain platform, you know, and it's a governance platform for these things to work. And the fact is, it was the American-led governance platform since 1945, which created the global structure, by the way, thrive more than maybe any other country. Why would a country want to overturn the very structure that enabled its success? Is a head scratcher for me. But, you know, I was just looking up this morning. I'd been drafting notes of a book that was just in my own mind. This wouldn't be the title of it. Was called Fast, Fused, and Deep, and basically, and I noticed that the last time I'd saved it was March 3rd. So I had not looked at it since March 3rd, and I was thinking, geez, I got to remember, like, where was I? You know, but But basically, the argument I was making is that the world has experienced three great Promethean moments. Prometheus being the Greek god who steals fire from Mount Olympus and gives it to human beings to build civilization. The first was the printing press and Gutenberg. The second was the Industrial Revolution. Now, my friend at the World Economic Forum have argued that we're now in what they call the fourth Industrial Revolution. They've argued that it's a continuum from the Industrial Revolution, in the 1700s, and then there was a second, a third, and a fourth. And my argument is no. No, this is not a continuum. That we are actually in a third great Promethean moment, and it's been driven by the simultaneous non-linear accelerations in the three largest forces on the planet, what I call the market, Mother Nature, and Moore's Law: technology, globalization, and climate. And they have all accelerated at a speed, scope, and scale that is difference of degree, that is a difference in kind. And in doing so, they've blown away the ceiling, the walls, and the floor, okay? So they made the world faster than we thought that there were speed limits on this speed of change. And alas, there aren't. They've busted through the ceiling. Whatever speed limits on the change and the pace of change we thought there was, or on the pace of change, they've blown through. They've made the world fuse. They've blown away the walls. Okay, and this pandemic just proves it, okay? That we've gone from interconnected to interdependent to, okay? Now a virus in a wet market in Wuhan has completely upset my life, okay? So it's a degree of interdependence we haven't seen before. And lastly, we busted through the floors because technology now is going so deep, it can now toggle your DNA. It's going to a depth of AI into your mind, into finding the needle in the haystack is the norm, not the exception. So all these are happening at the same time. Just to finish this point, so the world's getting fast, fused, and deep. And by the way, again, I'm a big believer in popular culture, so I follow music. So I started this with a song. What was the song of the year last year? Of course, that won the Oscar. It was "Shallow" by Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga. But what was the main verse? I'm off the deep end, watch as I dive in. I'll never reach the shore, crash through the surface where they can't hurt us. We're far from the shallow now. Oh, James, baby, we are far from the shallow now. We have technology going so deep. And it's the world is becoming fast, fused, and deep at the same time. And as a result of that, we have a education challenge, because when the change and the pace of change gets this fast, in the old days, governments educated and employers employed. That was the division of labor. But what's basically happening, and this is what I was studying before all this happened, was how many businesses are now going into the education business.
Yes.
I showed you IBM or Infosys' in-house university, James. You would say, Tom, how do I get my kid in there? These knuckleheads in California who are bribing their kids to get into USC, they've got school, okay? You want to get into Infosys U or IBM U, okay? So it's changing that relationship. A fused world, requires, there's a whole set of issues that require global governance, but there is no global government. So this is a perfect example. Again, we have a whole issue here that requires global government, because the virus can move anywhere and it doesn't know where the border is between France and Germany, and so a fused world requires a different kind of government, and a deep world. Oh my gosh, a deep world. In the old days, the government regulated, and you, James, innovated. But you are innovating so deep, so far into my DNA, I don't even know where you are, okay? I actually had a quote from Boeing engineers. These were leaked emails in the New York Times. They had, it was two Boeing engineers talking about their FAA regulator, their government regulator. Yeah. And one of them says to the other, basically, these are my words, not theirs, my regulator is so clueless that watching him watching us is like watching dogs watching television. I actually thought on the book, Watching Dogs Watching Television. So you have three giant mismatches, okay? You have a world getting so fast that the old role of government around education doesn't work anymore, okay? it has to be a public-private partnership. You have a whole speed of fusing of globalization where the old system, America first, is completely inappropriate. And you have technology going deep so much faster. That's the whole Facebook story. That government, it's there they go, I must catch up, for I am their regulator.
Mm.
So we have, in the middle of all this, we're in the middle of also giant changes.
And I'm assuming, if it is Promethean, Tom, I'm assuming that you're saying these things may be interrupted. You may have not had a chance to look at it or really think about it since March the 3rd, but they're not going to be slowed or derailed by a global pandemic, even if it runs 2-3 years or so.
I think these are long-term structural changes.
So then can I ask,
to make one other point? I've been telling people lately, because I just realized this. I've actually, pandemics is us. Been doing for the last 20 years is covering pandemics. The first was a geopolitical virus, came out of the Middle East because of the competition over Islamic radicalism between Iran and Saudi Arabia. It was called 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
The second was a financial virus. It was caused by greed and unbridled, banking, unrestrained banking, if you can call it that, in the United States. It was called 2008. The third is a viral pandemic. It was caused by our invading ecosystems, basically, around the world, killing off the apex predators, leaving behind the generalized species of bats, rats, and primates, who can live in destroyed ecosystems and co-evolve with their viruses. Then we go in and extract them from these destroyed ecosystems and crazily sell them next to domesticated meat in Wuhan wet markets. And of course, one jumps and we get a zoonotic disease. Then overlay on that a globalization system that now has so many nodes that just, this is Metcalfe's law. Each node makes it both stronger and weaker at the same time, in a sense, because you can now transmit from one little node in Wuhan that virus, and it goes global. It's everywhere in 2 months. And I'm about to cover the next great pandemic called climate change.
Yeah.
Climate change is different, actually, from COVID-19 in 3 important ways. One, it doesn't peak. So if the Iceland, if the ice sheet, the Greenland ice sheet melts, if the Antarctic ice sheet melts, we lose the reflectivity of those ice sheets for the sun. So those rays will then hit the ocean. The oceans will rise and will boil the ocean, and it doesn't peak. Okay, there's no herd immunity to climate change. There's just pounding on the herd. And lastly, the crazy thing is, with the climate change to the virus, we actually know we have the vaccine right now.
Yeah,
reducing CO2 emissions, but can we do it? So I actually, all I do is cover. It turns out all I do is cover viruses. They just come in geopolitical, financial, climate, and epidemiological forms. But that's all I'm doing.
And then Tom, what do you do when you've digested that and you've got a lens on the world as you do? I think a lot of people, certainly I feel invigorated hearing you and seeing it clearly, but also I bet once this is over, when I reflect on it, actually I'm going to feel really deeply depressed. I'm going to feel depressed at the thought that all of the things that you're asking for, adaptation, coordination, a world that somehow works out how to step into the gap in global leadership, those things are just not happening. So how do you think about that in a constructive way and think, okay, well, what can people, societies, governments do about that?
There's only, I don't know about people in society. I know as an American, we have to elect a different president.
Right. And just if you get a different one, do you think that a good deal of this will change? I.e., is this a political hiatus or is it a long-term trend?
It's a little of both. Donald Trump is a unique character. There aren't 3 of them out there in the zoo. 3 others. A politician. We have a terrible problem right now. We have a president without shame. We've never had a president who lived without shame. So he will say anything and not care. We have a president without shame. He's backed by a party without spine. Just a complete invertebrate, a party completely without spine. And they're amplified by a network called Fox News and the Rupert Murdoch engine. that is utterly without integrity. Now, when you put together a president without shame, backed by a party without spine, backed by a network that has global reach, that has no integrity, wow, you have a real problem. So the necessary but not sufficient thing is, first of all, you have to unelect Donald Trump and take the power of the state away from him, replace him with a normal person. Then you have to hope that in doing so, you break the whatever virus has gripped our conservative party in America, the Republican Party. We need a healthy conservative party in our two-party system. We do not have that right now. We have a very warped conservative party. It's now been remade in Trump's image, and that's a terrible image. So I think we'll only know after this. But look, as you probably know, I am no fan of social networks. I use Twitter as a broadcast mechanism for my column, but that's it. If you're tweeting about me out there, y'all have a good time. I don't look at it, okay? I don't even know how to get on it. My secretary has to do it. I'm not interested. When some guy drives up at a stoplight, rolls down his window and screams at me, I'm no more interested in him than what you say about me on Twitter, okay? But I do use it as a broadcast platform. I've never looked at Facebook. I don't know what it looks like. I believe that on balance, these have been very unhealthy innovations, and they've really been exploited by some of the worst people to really damage our cognitive immunity.
But Tom, just in the last few minutes then, we haven't got close in this conversation really to how technology, artificial intelligence feeds into this. But clearly in dealing with the really big challenges, markets, Mother Nature, Moore's Law, they are going to be transformed by our use of data and the capacities of intelligent systems to learn on the job. How do you think that fits in to addressing these big challenges to the way we live?
Well, obviously it gets that deep question, James, of how do you govern deep technologies that can go this deep?
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I was working on before all this happened, because clearly what you need is public-private partnership. It goes back to Senator Orrin Hatch asking Mark Zuckerberg at a Senate hearing, Mr. Zuckerberg, if you give your product away for free, how do you make money? So the regulator had no clue how the innovator's product even worked. So somehow we have to find an open source solution to that, where it's actually the users of Facebook help us with the governance, because that's the only way you can keep up, to me, with the speed of Facebook going deep. And I don't even know quite what that looks like. I think you had Shoshana Zuboff on before, and I think she's great and has some ideas on that, but clearly the old system of I regulate, you innovate.
Yeah.
Innovations going this deep, this fast, that just doesn't work. By the time you catch them, they're already on to the next thing. So it's got to require some kind of open source solution. And I don't know what that, I will be on my skill set. You should ask Shoshana.
Well, happily, Shoshana's actually joining us in about 15 minutes, so I'll literally bounce out of this and ask her exactly that question. Tom, you talk about all these things with a degree of warmth and cheerfulness, and in the last question then, I have to ask though, are you frightened by the direction of the world or optimistic?
So you may or may not know, James, I'm from Minnesota. I grew up in an amazing community, a little town outside of Minneapolis called St. Louis Park. I grew up in the same time and place, went to the same Hebrew school with Al Franken and Norm Ornstein and the Coen brothers and Sharon Isbrin and Michael Sandel. And we all grew up in the same little town, same rough time, same place. It was an amazing place. So I grew up in a time and place where politics worked. And actually it affected all of us. I mean, Al took it into politics, Norm Ornstein took it into politics. Sandel took it into communitarianism. I took it into my journalism. The Coen brothers took it into film. We all grew up in a kind of civic, very strong civic culture. And so I have my default option, my default setting is on optimism, problem solving. How do we get this? I don't do pessimism well. So I always tilt that way. And sometimes people confuse my enthusiasm for just connecting ideas hey, the world is flat, with approving all those ideas. It's not. I just love connecting dots that illuminate and explain the world to me better. I see my job as a translator from English to English, taking really complicated thoughts and explaining them in simple ways that I can understand in hopes that other people can understand them, because I live by Marie Curie's motto. This is why I went into journalism. Now is the time to understand more so we may fear less. And we live in an age where there are now businesses that are out there to make you understand less and fear more. And so I went into journalism for just the opposite reasons. And I sometimes can get overly excited about dots I connect, whatever. But right now I'm as worried as I have ever been, because I always saw my own country as that source of leadership, aid and comfort, and truth and facts. And right now we are not. And right now it is not guaranteed that Joe Biden will defeat Donald Trump. And America could get by with 4 years of Trump. 8 years, and we are a different country. We are not the America you knew and loved. I cannot imagine the damage that 4 more years of this terrible, terrible man could do to my country and residually to the world. And so that has me very worried, but when I get worried, I just try to do more journalism. I've got this platform, that's what I try to use it for. I don't sit around, I don't do drugs, I'm not a pessimist. I write columns, that's all I can do, and books.
Well, Tom, all I can say is to keep doing that drug, keep doing that column drug, because it's really working for all of us. I totally understand not watching and following Twitter. You would have blushed to have seen the comments that have been made while you've been speaking about what you said and the clarity of your thinking. On behalf of all of us, a huge thank you. You are, amongst many other things, a great advertisement for Minnesota. Thank you.
Everybody.
Have a great day. Thanks, everyone. We'll be back in 15 minutes on the hour with Shoshana Zuboff talking about surveillance capitalism. Tom Friedman, a big thank you.